Okay, so let's get started here. So we're going to be talking about, oh, there's me next to me. I probably should remove that. We're going to be talking about effective daily stand-up meetings or effective daily scrum, or like I like to call them, is the daily face-to-face meeting. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So here is, post this here one more time in case anybody doesn't have it yet. There's a link. What do you call your team's daily meeting? Is it the daily scrum, the daily stand-up, the daily face-to-face? We've got 7% people are probably coming from teams that I've talked to at one point or another. No one's here for the daily airing of grievances, whether or not that's what they actually do. So lots of things we call things, and we'll talk about the names, kind of where it came from here in a little bit. So let's, okay, so moving on next. So what is the biggest pain point in your daily meeting? So something that kind of stands out, this is what makes it hard, or this is how we're not getting the value we want to get out of our daily meeting, regardless of what you call it. Roadblocks, okay? So you're having daily meetings and there's roadblocks that are moving forward. Too much of a status meeting and not a plan for the day. That's a good point. Too long. Yes, you start losing people and don't accomplish things. Rambling and getting into the weeds. Yes, that is a common issue. Team lead shares team and company updates every day, okay? Problem solving during the meeting, stopping it from becoming an update meeting is the thing you're struggling with. People not listening to each other. Keeping focus, so keeping focus on the purpose of the meeting. Too much time on one item, so I'm guessing beyond beyond what's needed just to coordinate from the day. The amount of time it takes, I guess. Non-pertinent information. Too many people attend, which probably relates to the time. Reliant on the Scrum Master leading it. Team members providing more detail than needed during stand-up that should be more of post-Scrum conversation. So trying to find that right balance of what everybody needs to know, what just a few people need to know. Nothing to discuss, but still holding the meeting just to keep up with the ceremonies, okay? That's an interesting thought there. If you've got a team and there's not really anything that needs to be coordinated, which is cool if that's the case. Talking over one another feels too much like reporting meeting, repetitive updates, management attending and interjecting commentary. Okay, only team leads speaking, trying to resolve issues during stand-up. The team sees it as reporting versus an opportunity to collaborate on where everyone is and how they can reach each other in the time. And Todd is the problem with the meeting. So I think the team I'm working with right now, Todd is a cat. Or this may be from someone else who actually there's someone named Todd that is the problem with the meeting. So lots of different pain points around meetings. But hopefully the reason I like doing this is show your problems probably are not unique. We all getting a daily meeting where it's really effective can be really, really hard, and there's usually always room for improvement. Okay, so if you don't have a copy of Starting Agile, feel free to email me. I'll send you where you can get a digital copy of it. Okay, here's our plan for the next few weeks. Today we're talking about effective daily face-to-face meetings. Next week, I'm not sure what we're going to do yet. Got a few ideas, but haven't nailed one down. You should be getting an invite soon on that. On the 3rd of next month, Dominica is going to be talking to us about making products visible. So this would be a great one to invite people to. Dominica does a lot of stuff with Kanban and Flow. And I think this is going to be really, really helpful. I'm really looking forward to it. Then on the 10th, we're going to be doing our deep dive into Agile Principle number 5. I don't know if that should be 4. Do I have my months wrong? We're January, February, March, April. Oh, I've got all my months wrong. Okay. So on the 3s and the 4s, add a month to those. So those are actually for May. I think, yes, April, May, yes. Okay. So those are off. Sorry about that. And then on the 5th of July, Julia Webster is going to be joining us. She's going to be talking about what are the odds, talking about forecasting based on the probability of different things. If you joined the talk where we had Dan Viconti and Colleen from Pro Kanban, they actually referenced one of her articles. We sent it out. So anyway, really excited about having her come too. So those are some special things that are coming up. So don't miss those. Yes, my months are off by 1. Should be able to fix it fast, but I'll just move on to the next slide. Okay, so here's the Q&A. I'll come back to this as we go. If you have an idea of something that worked really well for your team, throw it up there. You can vote ideas up and down. If you have a question about something, we'll try to go through those at the end. So daily Scrum. If you're following Scrum, the idea of a daily stand-up meeting comes from Scrum. There's specific ways to do it and go through it. But what is Scrum? And, it sounds very much like scum. And so you have people calling it the daily scum. And where did that come from? This is a scrum. So in rugby, a scrum is where you get everybody like pushing up against each other. So they're like pushing on each other, and then you throw the ball into the center of it and center of everybody, and that's how the play is actually started. So it's kind of a much more violent version of a toss-up like we would do in basketball in the U.S. But it's the way that you start the work. It's how play gets kicked off, how things get started. When the very first thing that you do this, and that's how you kick everything off, get it going. And that's why it's called the daily scrum, is the way to kick off the work for the day. Like this guy over here with that really big furry thing. I guess it's a microphone, but it looks like he's got like a raccoon or something on a stick. I don't know if that's a British thing or what. Anyway, and then the kid with the lollipop. Anyway, this is a daily scrum. So if you think in terms of your daily stand-up meeting or your daily scrum, first of all, this doesn't last very long. It's just the way to get the play started. It's just a way to kick off what you're wanting to do for the day. Daily scrum versus daily stand-up. Most of the teams that I see they're doing software development are using a daily stand-up to follow some sort of scrum or something else that is somehow related to scrum. They may be doing Kanban, but they're having a daily stand-up, kind of hitting some of the points that you'd hit with daily scrum. A daily scrum is very defined, exactly what happens, time-boxed, and things like that. And you can find it in the scrum guide. Daily stand-up oftentimes is a little bit more generic, and those have been used for years. Sometimes like in nursing, when you trade off between shifts, there's some type of meeting that you make that exchange on, and you could potentially refer to that as a daily stand-up, whether it's standing or not. So those types of ideas have been around for a long time. For the purpose of this talk, we're going to be talking about how these things kind of merge together, how people are doing the daily scrum or daily stand-up kind of, but still based a little bit on the scrum model, even if it's modified. Okay, so daily stand-up. Like I mentioned, I like to call this, replace stand-up with daily face-to-face. And the reason is because what's the point of this meeting? Why are we doing this meeting? If we think about why we're doing it, maybe we can make sure that the way we talk about it helps emphasize what we're actually doing. It's a mic to cover damp and wind sounds. Well, that sounds much better than the idea that you can buy a raccoon on a stick at games in England. It's a popular state fair food. Oh, that's great. Okay, so if we're following Agile, where should we look to figure out what this daily stand-up, daily meeting is supposed to do? So we can look at the Agile values and principles. So what I want you to do here is, these are a bunch of principles. Go ahead and rate these in terms of which principles best suggest teams have a daily stand-up. So just you'll move these up and down. Don't worry about the lower ranking ones, but just get the top 2 or top 3 or even just top 1, the principle that you think best actually represents something that would encourage teams to have a daily stand-up. I'll paste this here one more time. Yes, and my months were off by 1. It's a common programming mistake, right? Whether you start with 0 or 1. Somebody said my voice was breaking up. Is it sounding better now? We mostly good? I was having some problems with my Wi-Fi earlier, and I think they're resolved. But... Okay, cool. Okay, so which of these principles, go and rank them in order. So move to the very top, the one that you think is most suggest having a daily stand-up, and just try to get the top 3 or so. Okay, so we've got business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. So that's what we've ranked as first right now. The most efficient efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within the development team is face-to-face conversation. So those are in the first and second, and then third place is deliver working software. We'll give that just a second because these are always interesting to see how these play out. But the two things that we've got at the very top right now are that we need to work together and that we need to have face-to-face conversations the best way to communicate. I'm going to mute everybody real fast. Make sure somebody doesn't come on accidentally. Okay, so those are the top things that we're doing. So if we're looking at those and trying to figure out how we should actually, what is this meeting for? It sounds like one of the ideas, one of the things that could really suggest having meetings that we need to work together. And the second one is that we want to actually get people and talking and face-to-face communication. Well, I'll go back here. You can add Q questions and ideas to this. So the best way to communicate is face-to-face. This is the one that usually stands out to me. So the goal of our daily face-to-face or daily stand-up meeting is not for everyone to stretch their limbs. The goal is to actually get people communicating. And Agile says that the best way to communicate is face-to-face. So if we call it that, maybe it'll help us focus on what we're trying to do is actually get everybody together and have good communication. I was working on a team one time, and they were trying to do, they had been meeting together and then they were going remote. And when they were together, they'd always do their daily stand-up. Everybody'd stand up, talk for 15 minutes, work out what they were doing for the day, and then go to work. Well, everybody went home, and they ended up with this. So everybody goes home, and it comes time for daily stand-up, and this happens. It's like this. Everybody's like this on their video conference and stuff. And it didn't take too long to realize that daily belly-to-belly communication really wasn't what we were trying to accomplish. So everybody finally sat back down where we could actually see what each other were doing. So it sounds kind of funny, but it's easy to get in the habit of focus. If you're focused on the position of the people, whether they're standing, sitting, laying down, or whatever, you miss the point of what it's trying to actually accomplish. The idea of standing up is a way to help keep things focused and short. But you can self-police that as well. You really want to just make sure that you're doing good at communicating. When I go in and work with a team first, one of the ways that kind of the litmus test, or a little bit of a litmus test, is whether or not they're trying to use some way, whether or not they're prioritizing face-to-face communication or doing something else. I was working with one team, and they all called into a conference bridge from outside of their team room. In the elevator, in the hallway, back at a cubicle somewhere. They'd call in for the daily stand-up meeting, listen in, report their 3 things, and then once it was over, they'd hang up and walk into the team room and sit down. Well, that's a pretty good indication that they're missing the point of what they're supposed to be trying to do in that particular meeting. And it had a lot of other odd things about that particular team. But when I noticed that, it was kind of like, what, if these people aren't actually trying to prioritize face-to-face communication or their day. This is actually a writer from a band that was in, actually I'll let you guess what the band is and maybe when you think it was, but from a band. And notice in their writer, this is like all the things you had to do to make sure, when they came. So you had to have munchies, potato chips with assorted dips, nuts, pretzels, M&Ms, warning, absolutely no brown ones, no brown M&Ms. And then 12 Reese's peanut butter cups, 12 assorted yogurts, all these things that they needed to have. 48 large bath-size cloth towels. That's interesting. Anyway, they've got all this stuff. This particular writer, so we got Van Halen, U2, Rolling Stones. So yes, it's it actually was Van Halen in, I think this was from 1982. So they may have had it before then too. So Van Halen in 1982. And years later, people were asking about this and saying, what in the world was up with this? What did you have against brown M&Ms? And what they said happened is if people didn't pay attention to this writer, there were lots of technical things in here as well. And I believe they had one instance where they went into a stadium set up and people hadn't paid attention to what the weight requirements were going to be. And so their huge light setup sank like down into the ground. And it was a dangerous situation. I don't know that anybody was hurt, but it was a pretty dangerous situation because somebody hadn't read through the writer. So what they did is they stuck this thing in here, absolutely no brown M&Ms. They could go into the green room, and if there were brown M&Ms, they knew that the people had not read the writer very carefully, and they needed to be extra careful because somebody was likely to get hurt because they couldn't trust any of the other specifications as well. Which was kind of a crazy story. But that's what happens when I'm looking at teams and they're trying to do their daily stand-up meeting, and they're prioritizing standing up over are we communicating about what we're trying to do, and over let's make sure we've got face-to-face communication of talking through things. To me, that's kind of like finding the brown M&Ms. It's like, yeah, I bet there's a bunch of other things we're not actually paying attention to what Agile says as well. And so somebody asked about what I did yesterday, what I'm working on today, and what do I need help with. We're going to mention that in just a minute. So good question. So what do we hope to achieve out of a daily face-to-face meeting? Well, we hope to achieve communication. What do we get from communication? We get efficient work. That's what we're trying to actually achieve. Do we get efficient status reports? No, we're not looking for an efficient way to give status reports. We're looking for ways to coordinate the work for the day in the most efficient way possible toward trying to achieve our goal, whether it's our sprint goal or whether it's achieving flow or whatever it is. We want efficient work for the day, and that's what we're trying to coordinate. So put visually, we want to do this. We want to take these things and get them over here. That's success, taking things that we have on our backlog or our to-do and getting them deployed to production. So I want to show you something here. I haven't used this before, but I think you'll find it interesting. This is a traffic simulator. Let me restart it. Okay, so here's a traffic simulator. We've got all these things, and this is kind of a cool little thing. So we've got our density in our lanes set to 30 vehicles per kilometer. So we're going around here, and we're at about 5,400 vehicles per hour. Okay, that's kind of where we're starting at. And okay, it's kind of going down. I know what we'll do. Let's speed things up. Let's say you can drive as fast as you want. That will fix the problem here, right? Okay, we're back up to 5,400 vehicles per hour. Look at them go. Uh-oh. What's happening? Okay. That's not, we're slowing down here. So this one we were looking at right over here is down to 2,880 vehicles per hour. Okay, well, obviously what we need to do here, we need to add some more cars, right? Look over here. Look at all this empty space. We could fill that with cars. So I'm going to take this here and I'm going to speed this up. Or add more people to it. Let's go 50 vehicles per kilometer. Well, that didn't. Okay, now we're at 3,000. Okay, well, we've got some. No, now we're at 2,500 vehicles per hour. That's no good. No, oh no, down here we're at 0 vehicles per hour. But look at all this empty space. I know what we need to do here. We need to like bump this up. Let's put 70 vehicles or 60 vehicles per kilometer. And that will, oh no, it's just getting worse. Well, obviously there's still some empty space there. What if we go ahead and take this and we bump this up? Let's take it up to 80 vehicles per kilometer. Okay, now, hey, look, we've got 2,500 vehicles per hour right here, so that's good. We're not nearly at the 5,000 where we were, and up here we're 2,000. No, we're down to 1,800, and this one's 0, and that one's going up. Okay, so do you see a problem here, right? But let me take this and go the other way. Let's say we're not as worried about how much we can fill in the space. Let's think more in terms of how can we, okay, well, 0 won't get us anything. Let's go to 6 vehicles per kilometer. Okay, we're at 14. Well, that's good. At least seems stable, fairly stable. Can I go up a little bit faster beyond that? Okay, well now let me do my time warp. We'll do this really fast so we can see how things. So it's the same simulation, it's just going faster. Now we're at 4,000 right here. I can go. Can I add more? Can I add a little bit more? We were at 30 before. What if I do 20? Is that going up or down? Looks like it's a little bit better. But man, we're only got 20 vehicles per kilometer. Look at all that empty, wasted space here. And the point of this is this is what type of thing that you should be trying to solve in your daily face-to-face meeting, is trying to figure out how you can efficiently get these things moving across, not how you can be busy. Now, a lot of times you'll see people using 3 questions saying, what did you do yesterday? What will you do today? And do you have any impediments? And that can be very, very valuable. But sometimes those types of questions can get away from the idea of how do we actually prioritize finishing work. If we're asking what you can do, what you do yesterday, what will you do today? Do you have any impediments? It's very easy for this to turn into mostly a status report. The 3 questions can be very, very useful, but let's imagine a scenario. Let's say that you're going through and you're doing your daily stand-up, and you go around and you ask everybody those questions. What did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? Do you have any impediments? And during the middle of your daily stand-up, your daily face-to-face, the fire alarm goes off, and everybody has to leave the building, and then they come back later and go to work. Would you feel that you covered the most important things? Or is there something else you might wish you had have discussed instead of what actually got discussed? So would you wish you had have talked about something else before the fire alarm went off? So the 3 questions can be very useful, but often they just are a way to make sure that people are busy. So how could the daily face-to-face meetings, prioritize the most important things? So one way of doing this is story-based daily face-to-face meetings. So if we look at this, we've got all these things on the board of what we're doing. We've got stuff in ready, requirements, developing, testing, and done. And our goal here is to get things done, right? Well, not all these things are equivalent, right? If we take the mantra stop starting and start finishing, which story can we get a return on investment from the soonest? I'm covering up my stuff here. So which story can we get a return on investment from the soonest here? Is it the story that's just going into requirements? Or is it the story that we're just trying to get out of testing? Well, the story that's just over on the right that's out of testing is the thing we probably can deploy the soonest and get done. And so if we approach our stand-ups with the idea that that's the goal, is to get things done, we might actually find that going around and just asking everybody the 3 questions isn't the most efficient way of doing things. So let's look at a different example of this. Let's say you've got a shoe store. You know, I like using, is it Bob's Shoes? Sam's Shoes, right? Sam's Shoe Store. And if we represent all of our customers, something like this, we've got customers that are outside. They're out on the sidewalk. We could go out and try to compel them to come in, try to encourage them to come in. We've got some that have just stepped inside the door. We've got some that are actually shopping. And then we've got some that are at the checkout. And then some that have completed the checkout and left the store. Well, not all of these are equal in their revenue potential, right? The people that are outside probably are the least likely to, have the most work to happen before they can actually give us money. But the people at checkout, they're standing there with money in hand wanting to buy stuff right now. If I prioritize them, it's not that the others aren't important, but the first thing I should try to do is probably get them checked out. Another example of this, if you've ever played the game Overcooked, if you haven't, I encourage you to play it. It's lots of fun. I think is it 4 players? 4 players? Yeah, 4 players. And you're running around cooking stuff in the kitchen, which doesn't sound like much fun, but the mayhem that results from it is awesome. So you've got to take your dishes through several different stages. Well, those stages, you've got preparing it, you've got cooking, and then it's ready to deliver. The thing that's actually most valuable to you in the game that actually gets you the points is actually delivering the food. You can keep on adding stuff to prepare, but that doesn't actually help you. I was playing this with my kids, and they were like saying, hey, let's get all the tomatoes out and put them out on the counter so we're ready. Well, if we weren't delivering the food, we're not actually getting points from that. And then my son just covered the floor with tomatoes, which was exciting, but didn't help us win. But it was fun. Okay, so why is this so hard? This isn't the way we usually think about things. And if we're thinking about the way that we're going to, if we think about the way that we're going to talk about our daily stand-up, we may want to start with those things that are clear over on the right and work our way toward the left. That way, if a fire alarm happened, we'd have covered the things that have the largest chance of providing value. Well, the reason this is often hard is because most code isn't going to immediately benefit the customer. And if we're in a situation where the code that we're working on, we don't feel is going to benefit the customer anytime soon, like, yeah, we could deliver it, but they're not going to get it anytime soon, it's really easy to see that as not much more important than the other things that we could be working on. So in thinking about the meeting, actually, let me go back to that. So if we were going to have a meeting for Overcooked about what we should work on, we probably should start with what's ready to deliver. How can we get this stuff out the door to deliver it? Because, in Overcooked, you may actually catch something on fire. So, you probably should start with that. The next thing we would want to talk about is how can we get the cooking stuff moved to the next stage? And after that, how can we get the stuff that's prepared moved on? And if you approach that with your daily face-to-face, actually, let me go through so I don't confuse you too much with the cooking stuff. So testing, development, and requirements. If we first focus on how can we get stuff out of testing to done and go through that story and say, what will it take to finish this? And we got two people say, well, we can work on that. Okay, they're working on that. And then the next thing there. And then we keep on moving across the board till we run out of capacity. It's great if you could put something else in requirements, but if you've already got everybody busy for the day on getting these things that are to the right to done, you probably don't need to worry about the things that are all the way to the left. If we go around and just have everybody answer their three questions, we may randomly happen to do this in a way that's efficient, or we may randomly do it in a way that's not efficient. So that's where the story-based approach of starting on the left, or starting on the right, and then working your way across to the left helps make sure that you started with the most important thing when people are most engaged and assign the best people you possibly can to it, and then progressively work your way across to the left. Now, normally, hopefully you're working in a place that you don't always have fire alarms go off, and you can actually get through the rest of the board, but that helps make sure you're prioritizing things according to what the way you actually deliver value instead of just how the people happen to be standing around in the room. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so now one of the big things that came up is people were saying, okay, I see the point. We can't just address those that are ready to close. We need a healthy pipeline or funnel. Yes, that's right. But the ones that you have the biggest chance of getting a value out of are the ones at the checkout. If you work in such a way that those people then turn and leave the store because they're not getting serviced, that's probably a bigger failure than not pulling people in off the sidewalk to come in. But very good point about a pipeline. Okay, who's getting value from the meeting? One thing that came up is people aren't engaged. So why aren't people engaged? Well, when I get asked this, is a lot of times people are saying we're having trouble getting people engaged. How do we get people engaged in the daily face-to-face meeting? And then the next question is, how do you convince them that it's valuable? And I would suggest that this question is kind of a little bit backwards, because your goal isn't to convince them they're valuable. The question is, how do you make sure it is valuable? How do you make sure that the meeting is actually valuable to the people that are attending? You want to fix this first. You want to make sure that it actually is valuable first. And then if it is valuable and a couple people just don't like the meeting, well, that's, maybe they're just, like Eeyore, I'm upset about everything. Maybe there's nothing you do about that. But you want to first start out by making sure that it is valuable to people. Too often we worry about how to get others to behave different and miss the fact that we can actually change what we're doing in ways to create a better environment for them. It's not just a status update. Your daily face-to-face meeting shouldn't just be a matter of you reporting stuff. And that's where the three questions can sometimes become just a status meeting. I was with one team, and one day they went around and every single person said, yesterday I worked on my 360-degree evaluation. Today I will continue to work on my 360-degree evaluation, no blockers. And every single person went around the room saying that. It did not provide any value to anyone. And so if your meeting, if what comes up in your meeting mostly just represents the organizational things you have to do, it's probably not actually helping people. So teams should value the coordination. And if you think in terms of, do you have a team or do you have a collection of individuals? Is the team collaboratively delivering the best return on investment, or are individuals just working their list of tasks? An effective daily face-to-face meeting is going to make sure that you're in that top category there of helping the team deliver collaboratively rather than individuals just working on their lists of tasks. And that's one of the reasons that I find it very effective to do a story-based approach and start at the right and work our way back, because it puts you in a position where there's more corporate ownership of the stories, and the goal of the team is to deliver the stories, not the goal of the individual just to deliver the story that happens to be assigned to them. So one thing I've recommended for some people to do is don't assign stories to individuals in Jira or whatever tool you're using, because if you do that, you start giving it making it more of this person's responsible for that and this person's responsible for this thing, instead of being focused just on how do we deliver a return on investment by getting this across the finish line. Now, there may be reasons you have to have it assigned to people. I'm not saying you should never do that. But if you're in a mentality where everybody's just reporting, here's the progress I made on my ticket, instead of collaboratively trying to figure out how you can make the best project toward your goal, your sprint goal or your Kanban goal or whatever you're working on, the fact that you have tickets assigned to individuals might not be helping you in that particular area. Yes, this particular one is recorded. If you want a copy of it, send it to me or send me an email and I'll put it up somewhere where you can get it. So let's talk about face-to-face for change management. So here's an example. I was working with a team at the Treasury, and the way things normally work is you would deliver a story ready to go to production, or a group of stories, and then it would go to this meeting where people would look at it and talk about it, and the security people would look at it and talk about whether or not it was actually safe to deploy into production. Since the coordination for all that work was happening at the daily face-to-face meeting, we proposed something different. We asked the security officers and said, you get all this stuff at the end. You get a huge amount of stuff, and you're trying to sift through it to figure out what it means and whether it's safe, and then you're actually putting your signature on it to say that it's safe, and I don't see how you could actually have very good information in your questions that you have, or anything you want to have changed should happen way earlier in the process. What would you think of coming to our daily face-to-face meeting so you can see these stories as they progress and provide input as we go? And so we did that. So we shifted their work all the way to the left, and they were at the daily face-to-face meeting. So previously we had done something like this, and we ready requirements development testing, and then wait 2 weeks for a security review meeting. So instead we shifted to this. So security would ask questions at the daily stand-up to understand the risk and to influence how the story was actually being created. If the security officer had a question and said, hey, you know what, if you do it like this, you're going to trigger this, you're adding a role and that's really risky, so you're going to trigger all these other things we have to do in audits. Is there any way to accomplish this without doing the role if you want to keep it smaller? And business might say, oh, okay, yeah, we can do that way. And those conversations were happening in the face-to-face meeting where they were coordinating the work for the day. It worked out really, really well. Now, occasionally a security person couldn't be there, but it wasn't a big deal because they had the context for everything. When it finally got through with testing, instead of waiting 2 weeks, the security person could just approve it because they were like, oh yeah, I know exactly what's happening here. I've given my input. We've had some back and forth, and we feel this is safe to go to production. It was much more efficient for security and much less frustrating for the developers because developers address security concerns and ask for feedback as they develop and say, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? And work through those things, just really, really quick conversations with the business and the developers and security. And sometimes it required a longer conversation, and those got pushed to after the daily face-to-face, and they'd kind of talk through things. But it was amazing how much could be solved in just 45, 90 seconds of just saying, here's what we're doing today, or here's how we're going to make progress on this story today, and getting those types of that feedback from security. So by the time we got over here, security knows that everything is good, and they can approve it because they understand the context of everything. So that's one way we found for the daily face-to-face meetings to be very, very effective. And if you have positions and things, change management things that need to actually approve stuff, the information about those particular, the information they need to make approvals probably is happening at the daily face-to-face, or could be happening at the daily face-to-face, or large pieces of it. So a lot of times if you've got things where you've got a roadblock at the end where people are preventing, where there's a bottleneck at the end where somebody's got to approve things, you may find that bringing them into the face-to-face meeting can really remove those impediments and give them the ability to do their jobs much better than they were able to do when you're just kind of throwing things over the fence to them. Okay, here's a scenario. It's time for your daily face-to-face meeting and the Scrum Master doesn't show up. What happens with your team today? Okay, so we've got 4%. We'll just wait until the Scrum Master arrives. Looks about 50%. Team will just pick someone to run it. Or 30%. There's some specified team member that runs the meeting. Product owner runs the meeting. So these are all good things to have kind of in place. I particularly like C because it has the idea of this shared ownership, right? If your team is naturally doing C, it's likely because they're seeing the value in it and trying to get something out of it. I've had teams that I started working with, and when we started, I'd go in and not say much, but I'd sit there and the Scrum Master wasn't coming. I think I may have even told the Scrum Master, come late sometime, let's just see what happens. So we go and we sit in the room, and they have a conversation about, back to their college days and saying, well, wait, if the person has a PhD, we have to wait 10 minutes, but I don't think the Scrum Master has her PhD. Maybe we can all just leave after 5 minutes. And they had that conversation, and then I think the Scrum Master showed up. But the interesting thing, for them, it wasn't a matter of when I started working with them, they weren't seeing it as being valuable to them. They saw it as they were reporting back to the Scrum Master. Now, later on, that team got to the point that they would just kind of jump in and start coordinating the day's work because they had shifted their mentality about what it was for, from being a status report to being something that they were doing to help them work effectively. And they had made some other changes that were helping to enable that. But this is, if you see teams doing C, that's a really good sign. D, of just waiting for the Scrum Master to arrive, it probably means that they're not feeling like they're getting value from it, or they don't feel empowered. A and B are good things because you've got something that's set up and it's still going to move forward. The question then would be, what if the product owner isn't there too? Does the team pick it up and run with it? That's really what you want to have, is that type of culture around the daily face-to-face meeting. You want that shared ownership. Here's an idea that I thought was kind of funny when we first started doing it with a team, but it turned out to be very, very effective. A random team member runs the meeting. So what we would do with this particular team is every day at about 10 minutes before the daily stand-up meeting, in the chat tool, like the group chat everyone used, it would give three people's names, 1, 2, 3. And so the first person on there was supposed to run it unless they weren't available, then be the second person, then it was the third person. And that was really, really effective because everybody had to be a little bit on their toes of they were going to run the meeting. And they would just go through, start on the right-hand side of the board and work through the cards, just kind of facilitating it. There wasn't a lot of work to do it, but they just kind of facilitate keeping things moving and make sure everything gets started. That worked really, really well because it distributed the responsibility across the entire team, which really helps reinforce that this is for the team and by the team. So that's one thing that we've done that I've done with the team before that was a lot of fun and worked well. I got in once to the program and the continuous integration that would was generating those names and set it to be the same person, not actually be random. And I think we went about a whole week with the same person running it before we realized, wait, this probably isn't random, and went and looked at the code and saw the joke we had played on him. But that shared responsibility is very, very key. So responsible for what? Are they responsible for, is the team taking responsibility for finishing development work, for getting code working in QA, for getting code running in production, or for delighting the customer with new functionality? And really, this is what we should be focusing on. The stand-up should help the team delight the customer with new functionality. Now, all these other things here, these aren't bad things. These are things we want to do, but our goal is to delight the customer. And our conversation should be toward how do we delight the customer with new functionality. Let's see. Self-organize and run it. That's great. That's a great thing when teams are doing that. Things to avoid. Okay, so one thing to avoid is using the face-to-face meeting to give the Scrum Master an update. Ryan Latta did a session for us here a while back. We should try to get him back for another one. But he talked about when he's going and working with teams, if everybody's just giving a report to him, he'll just turn his back on everybody during the daily face-to-face, or just walk out of the room. And he said, because then it's like, who am I talking to? But his goal is to help emphasize that they're not reporting to him as the Scrum Master. He's just there to facilitate things. They're supposed to be coordinating and collaborating with each other. And yeah, if we do get him back sometime, try to make that talk. He's got a lot of very interesting ideas about running daily stand-ups. Another thing to avoid, waiting until the daily meeting to ask a question from another team member. I was working with one team and they were actually, I can't remember, I think they were still going around and asking people what'd you do yesterday? And they said, well, today I ran into a problem with X, Y, and Z or yesterday I ran into a problem with X, Y, and Z that I need to ask Bob about. And so I'm going to ask him here right now. And that was a normal thing until we started asking, wait, why didn't you just go ask Bob? You're like 3 desks down from him. You don't need to wait till the daily stand-up to ask this other team member, even if they're on a different floor, go find them and try to move forward. Yes, we're trying to coordinate here, but you don't wait to coordinate till you get here. This is just a way to kind of make sure we've got an overall plan. Using a daily meeting to avoid deep collaboration. So things you want to avoid is if you're using your daily face-to-face meeting to avoid needing to really deeply collaborate with each other, that's an anti-pattern as well. It should kick off those deep collaborations, not replace them. Another thing to avoid, only giving good news. This is one of the reasons that some teams prefer not to have management at the daily face-to-face meeting, because they want to keep it focused on the team and to make sure that people feel very free to speak up. Now, in really healthy organizations, really healthy teams, I've seen managers be there and do awesome, and this not being a problem, but it is something to think about whether or not you want management at your daily face-to-face if you're trying to create a healthy environment, and having them there is impeding that. Now, there's a tricky thing to deal with and stuff, but those are some of the considerations in those situations. Another thing you want to avoid, ignoring opportunities to provide better return on investment for the customer. Just because you have a plan and you have work on the board, if something changes and the customer has something else that is really, really vital, very, very important, or could give a really good return on investment, you want to have those conversations about how to actually help achieve what they're trying to do. I see here the customer does not join the stand-ups. Are you saying that like you don't think they're supposed to join the stand-ups, or in your particular situation you don't have a customer at the stand-up? Just curious on that. And I see we got a question here. Deep collaboration, do we mean pervasive collaboration, pairing, or mobbing? What I'm thinking of as deep collaboration is continuing to work in a way that you're focused on delivering, which may mean pairing or mobbing, but just if the focus is on how do we collaborate in a way that moves this forward. If it's a job where you just need to go away and type for 30 minutes, it probably isn't going to help for me to watch you do that. If it's a problem that we're trying to solve and you know some of it and I know some of it, and together we can actually solve things better than we could independently, we should be very willing to work together and say, okay, I have this other story that I've been working on, but the one you have actually is something we could deliver sooner. I'm going to wait on that, and let me help you get this across the finish line, because we win or lose together. It's not a matter of your story got completed and mine didn't. This is a matter of we actually worked and collaborated in a way to prioritize finishing something. If you've ever been on a team where everybody has started a ticket, but no one finishes anything by the end of the sprint, that's usually an indication that the team is focused on their individual contributions and not on how they collaborate and deliver things for the team as a whole. You'd be better off if the team's collaborating. Some of those things ought to get done. I mean, there's some exceptions, but some of those things should have gotten done at the expense of spending more time on other things, but at the benefit of actually having something that was completed. Are the stakeholders the same as the customers? So Agile talks about delighting the customer. Oftentimes those are stakeholders. In some organizations, though, you have stakeholders that are not the customer. They sometimes are the proxy for the customer, or representing some aspect of the organization that's not actually the customer. The most effective I've seen teams working is when the person that's actually going to use this on a day-to-day basis is their part of this. Sometimes it's been the person that uses maybe the admin portion of it on a day-to-day basis, but is very, very in tune with the customers they're using other parts of it. But if you don't have that person as part of a daily face-to-face meeting, if something starts to get off track and you're building something that maybe isn't what the customer needs, it's going to be hard for that to come up. If the customer is there and they start talking about, oh, we're going to solve this, we're going to create this story by doing X, Y, and Z, and the customer is like, yeah, we really don't need Y and Z. X is really the piece of this that gives the most value. That's where Agile is really, really effective at figuring out what you can leave out to deliver something that's valuable sooner. There seems to be no psychological safety in holding on to work to make sure there is a positive report. Not quite following on that. But in thinking of psychological safety, if I'm sinking or swimming as a team, and we're all either going to succeed or fail together, a couple things happen. One, I hopefully can at least complete some things as part of my sprint. Even if I don't complete everything, I should at least have something to show because we're prioritizing finishing things. The other thing is I'm not as likely to work at prioritizing just my work at the expense of other people if we're all in this together. If we're all in this together and we're all either going to succeed by delivering things or not succeed by not delivering things, and it doesn't really matter who was assigned to a particular ticket, it's a lot easier to go ahead and collaborate with other people because I want to see, it's not a matter of whether my ticket's successful or their ticket is successful. It's a matter of, can we get anything to be successful? And that's how we actually succeed, more so than, well, I worked on my ticket and got it almost done, but didn't. Or I worked on my ticket and didn't help anyone else and got mine done, so I look good, but the rest of the team looks like it failed. Okay, let's see. Okay, questions and answers. It doesn't look like we have anything on here, which is fine. That's great. I'm going to move on to this last thing. I'd love to get the presentation feedback. We do have about 12 minutes left in the lunch hour. If you need to go, please do fill out the presentation feedback. I will paste it here one more time just to make sure you get the opportunity. I go through these before I give sessions again and try to see what people liked and what they didn't like and try to improve them. So please do go ahead and fill that out. If you have any questions, want to come off mute and just ask your questions or throw them in the chat, I would love to hear what people have to say.
Hey, Mark, this is Anita, and I just wondered, I myself have fallen into a pretty bad pattern of doing the status report. I tell people what I've been doing and then what I'm going to do today, and if I have any, if I need any help, and then I ramble on about other stuff for a little while too. How do you, but others do variations on that as well. Right. And so how can we, without having to have, a complete, how can we just shift that? Nice.
So one idea is if you're focused on the stories, it's a lot like, so if you say what you did yesterday, some of the stuff that was going to come to your mind about things you did yesterday is not going to help the team make progress. I mean, at least that's how it is for me. Like, what did I do yesterday? Oh, I did this, and hey, this thing happened, and I filled out my TPS report or whatever, because I want to look like I'm showing that I did stuff, right? And if you've ever had the moment where you get to a daily stand-up and it's like, oh, I need to come up with some things I did yesterday. What did I do yesterday? I don't remember what I did yesterday. Oh, I need to come up with something so it actually looks like I was working hard. But then you're just trying to fill the time. You may not have anything important to tell the team. But if you're starting with a story and saying, here's the story that we're most likely to be able to get completed, what happened on that story yesterday, and what can we do to get it forward today? I'm not searching for something to say to make it look like I did something important yesterday. I can tell what I contributed to that story. I can have some ideas about how I can help move it forward today, but it shifts the focus on how you complete work, shifts the focus to how you complete work instead of just, here's what I did in the past. Does that help any?
Well, I think it helps me. But when, if we were to go into our stand-up tomorrow morning and say, okay, folks, I'm more guilty than most on using this like a status report opportunity. What is there a simple sort of mantra that we could say, before you take your turn, just think about, this.
So you're still talking about taking your turn, and what I'm suggesting is don't worry about trying to get everybody to talk. Worry about getting the people to say what they have to contribute toward the stories on the board and just walk through the stories rather than walk around the room. But the other thing you can do, and this is also from Ryan Latta, is to say the purpose of today's face-to-face meeting is to organize today's work toward the sprint goal. And get everybody, what he suggests is say that every time for like 2 or 3 weeks, every time right before your daily face-to-face meeting, so everybody knows it. And then start asking people, what's the purpose of today's face-to-face meeting? Just to help keep people focused on, you're trying to organize your work for the day to try to collaborate toward reaching the sprint goal. And if you do that, it can help people be less focused on here's what I did for the day. But doing the story-based thing is what I've seen work best, and both of those things together. Okay, let's see if we got some questions. If anybody's got a question, I'd love to hear them.
Hey, Mark, I'm not the only one interested in the traffic simulator.
The traffic simulator. Oh, yes. Where was that from? Okay, please do fill out the presentation feedback and let me figure out where that is. Get this, there's not full screen. Okay, it's traffic-simulation.de, and there's a bunch of other things there too. I'll send it out to everybody that was here in an email. In case.
Mark, I just posted the link to it. I think I found.
Awesome.
After I saw you play, I did a little googling and found it. So.
Okay, good, very good. Yeah, there's some really cool stuff with
Yeah.
that. And I like, for me, it really helped make me think of, am I doing things that I think are going to make things faster that are actually slowing things down? Like in this case, let's just add a bunch of trucks because they can carry more. Well, the trucks have different behavior than the cars, and it may not actually make things go faster. I like Jeff's comment here that going around the room, forcing everyone to have something to say can make it kind of tough on people. And keep in mind, our goal isn't to keep people busy, or our goal isn't to fill all the roadway here. Our goal is to actually make sure that we're making progress. Let's see. Are there other questions we ask other than just asking what we did yesterday and what we will be working on today and impediments? The idea of asking how can we make progress, I think is probably more important. How do we make progress toward meeting the goals that we have for ourselves today? Ask team what their plan is for the day and do they need assistance from team members. Another kind of test to see if it looks like your meetings are being effective is, are people jumping in to try, if you're having to tell people, wait, let's talk about that after can you guys discuss that after the face-to-face meeting? It probably is an indication that people are collaborating well, at least in the meeting. Now, if that's the only time they collaborate, that's probably not a good sign, but it means that people are listening to each other and hopefully trying to jump in and help with things. A good sign from daily face-to-face meetings is that it sets up and spawns off all the conversations that need to happen to have success for the day. So if the outcome of a face-to-face meeting is these 3 people go over here and talk, and these 2 people go over here and talk, and everybody else stays in the room because there's something else they wanted to discuss that goes beyond what was, just coordinating for the day, those are good signs. It means that good stuff is happening and people are trying to make progress moving forward and they're actually collaborating. Let's see. Can update politeness. This is going. Oh yes, there's the politeness on that. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, ideas?
I'll just throw in. This is Brigham. I'd put the comment up earlier, but it really seemed to me in my teams those burn down charts that looked like hockey sticks. So they kind of stay plateaued and don't drop until the very end, are symptomatic of everybody doing their own thing. So they're not collectively banging out the stories and having a more, steady downward slope. And at the end, people do or do not whoosh it away. But that is an indicator, that hockey stick.
That's a very, very good point, right? If you just get to the end and everything gets done the day before the end of the sprint, there's a lot of risk in that. And like you said, it may indicate there are some reasons it might look like that, but it may indicate that you're taking on a lot of risk and not collaborating and everybody's just working on their individual thing. That's a very good point. Very good point.
Yep.
Okay. A few more seconds. Any other ideas or comments or thoughts? That was really good. Thanks, Brigham.
Hey, Mark. It's Jeff. How you doing?
Hey, Jeff. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, man. Hey, I think one of the things I think that kind of helped me with the stand-up lockdown is to not forcing not trying to get people to understand they don't have to have something to say every meeting. I think that pressure of having to answer those questions, people feel like they have to have something to say. So before the stand-up, they're writing down notes of what they're going to say when it's their turn to speak.
Right.
And it may not have, and most of the time, it may not have anything to do with what's happening on the board. So I think that notion that if we're just talking to the board, not everyone's going to need to have something to say every day. They could be
Right.
doing research or something else and not have a direct impact on on any story there. So I think getting past that is a tough one.
That's an excellent point. And I mean, they ought to be collaborating. I mean, you might even have more people. You might have everybody speak up, but not just trying to tell what they're doing, but trying to help people get things across. You know, like, oh, well, did you talk to Bob? I think he knows about this. I mean, that's hugely helpful in a face-to-face meeting. But yeah, when you got people, and I've been there too, where it's like, oh, I've got to figure out what I'm going to say I did, and it's extremely uncomfortable, and it takes the focus away from collaboration and more on how do I make sure that I look like I was really, really busy yesterday and I can't remember exactly what I did, but I need to make it sound impressive.
Yeah, that's a common problem. Yeah.
Yeah, very good point. Thanks for mentioning that. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I hope everybody has a great week. Watch for an invite coming out. I'll send the traffic simulator along with the link to this recording because a couple of people had asked about that too. Thank you so much. Hope to see you next week.
All right, Mike. Well, you closed the meeting. Very good. And I'm actually going to reach back to last week.
Oh yeah.
I wondered about asking, then I didn't, and then it got away. Crap, I should have asked. So regarding TD